Well, it was a sort of strange thing. I'd always admired her as an actress, well, as a personality more than an actress, but as a glamorous being. And she came to Boston in January of 1961, played the Colonial Theater for 2 weeks. And of the 16 performances, I saw 14 of them, including sitting in the front row the first night and the last night, and went backstage and got to know her, meet her, and bring her little gifts in a single rose, and she loves chocolates, and she did then, and things like that. And so closing night, it was that terrible snowstorm in January. It was with Kennedy inauguration at the time. So it was really, if you remember that period, it was really, really cold and snowy. So the business had waned somewhat. It had been selling well, but people couldn't get in. So closing night, she made a very long curtain speech, which she didn't normally do, and thanked all the people that trudged out in the snow to see her and all that. And she said she wanted to thank one particular young man who had been to every performance. She made me get up and take a bow, and then she had invited me to come to the backstage party after, and I did, and invited me to see her off at the railroad station the next morning. It was mainly to help her schlep her bags, I think, but she always wanted to take advantage of an opportunity. So her next performance was going to be in Puerto Rico 2 weeks later, and I flew down for the opening, didn't tell her I was going to be there. And that's what started it. 2 weeks later, she was playing the Concord in upstate New York, and I went, and her dresser, because it was a single performance, her dresser was doing an off-Broadway show and couldn't be there. So she said, "You know the show better than anyone." She used to do the change from the gown into the tuxedo in those days. "So would you help me with the change?" So I did. The next thing I knew, she started calling me saying, "Well, your tickets are on the way. We go into rehearsal in Los Angeles on such a date, and their tickets are on the way." And I started out by doing various things in New York because of the unions. I was paid as her dresser, although I wasn't her dresser for both performances because somebody had to be on the books. She had her own maid in to do that. And then eventually,
he was the announcer.
I was the announcer for the show, and I was the stage manager for the show. Yeah. Finally, it went progressively.
And secretary, and pretty soon,
an errand boy and whipping boy.
Pretty soon, it was as if she depended on him for everything.
All those big ladies seemed to have an entourage, or at least one person. And in her case, I was that one person. And because of unions and what have you, there were ways to pay me to warrant my being there. So I would take over in name at least, being her dresser, although in reality I wasn't doing the dressing because she wasn't doing the change anymore, but the union required that a dresser be paid.
I remember once she fell off the stage and she hurt her leg and she had to go to the hospital, so Paul came home, and I was delighted because this was in the middle of the tour. I thought, oh, gee, I'm going to have him for a while. And her daughter called Paul up and said that she was at the Methodist Hospital
in Houston.
Houston, and I can't stand her. And she wants you, and just fly out and be with her. It won't be bad.
I spent the next 6 weeks living at the hospital
with her.
And she had a suite at the hospital, and I was living there, perfectly healthy, but living in a hospital for 6 weeks.
But to be in a hospital like that, you have to be a relation,
a blood relative,
a blood relative. So
or married.
I logically thought that she would say that you were her son. I mean, my golly, Marlene in those days was in her she was pushing 70, wasn't she, Paul?
Yeah.
He said, she said that I was her brother.
Oh, no.
So I spent 6 weeks there under my own name, but as her brother.
Yes.
She was there as Mrs. Rudolph Sieber, which is her married name.
You were her brother.
Because she was there incognito while she had bypass and what have you.